What's the worst case of rich kid syndrome you've seen? I've posted this before, and I need to say first off the bat that this is about my best friend and she is the best person I know. I.e., not normally rich kid or anything. I was complaining about how I was short on money one month, just couldn't go out to eat, because I had to pay rent and pay for tag renewal all in the same paycheck. She looked at me, super seriously, and was like, "Don't worry, they send you those in the mail for free." After a long discussion, she learned that in fact, her mom had been paying for her new tags every year. I worked as a bouncer at a high-end nightclub. The biggest boner of a rich kid, straight out of Malibu's Most Wanted, gets a VIP booth and bottle service, racks up a massive bill trying to act like a baller. His credit card gets denied, and he has to call his dad to come down at 1:30 a.m. because he can't order any more bottles. His dad comes down in his pajamas, obviously ashamed and furious at this douche of a kid. He ends up embarrassing his kid in front of his whole group of friends. He takes the kid's keys and is about to leave when his kid makes some garbage comment and goes back to the club. The dad's about to walk away after he apologizes for his son, when we offer to drag him out the rough way. He smiles and accepts. That kid hit every door and step on the way out. Not the best story, but was one of the most satisfying experiences working at that club. Didn't know if it qualifies as rich kid syndrome, but when I got out of the Navy, I decided to use my GI Bill at one of the Penn State satellites. I was sitting in the cafeteria drinking coffee and typing up a paper when a girl sits down across from me and opens her backpack. She pulls out a sandwich bag and looks at it in disgust, then looks at me dead in the eye and says, "I don't even know why I bother. My mom never cuts off the crust." I let out one of those high-pitched short laughs like, is this girl for real? Obviously to the tone of it, she says, "I know, right?" Then asks me if I want it. I looked around, thinking I was getting pranked or something, cause this thing is too stereotypical to be real, and I just assumed I was being filmed. She shook it at me and gave me a, well, look. So I said forget it, and took the sandwich. She then pulled out her student ID card and bought a crap ton of French fries. That sandwich was awesome. I think the bread was homemade, and it was stacked like a Dagwood. It had all kinds of expensive-looking meats and Dijon mustard. Serious gourmet. I know this girl's mother will never see this, but I just want to say someone appreciated that sandwich. This case isn't too bad, and it's a bit funny. I became friends with a kid whose family was really well off. He was a really nice bloke, but a bit sheltered, and university was the first time he really had any independence. But he had very little sense of what the value of a dollar really was, since his folks got him what he usually wanted, compared to what normal people would spend. There was one particular time he wanted us to eat at a restaurant, and he assured us it's really good. So we all rocked up to this place, and the price for main courses started at $40 to $60, which as poor uni students we couldn't afford. But when he realized this, he was so embarrassed he got his folks to pay for it. He's finally wised up a few years later once he got more independence away from his family, and made his own money, and remains one of the best blokes I know. A 12-year-old family friend got an iPhone XS for his birthday, then deliberately shattered his iPhone 8. I saw a 7-year-old daughter having iPhone XS with Dior ostrich skin cover. The cover was more expensive than the phone. Mommy got it for her birthday. I feel like you shouldn't give stuff like that to kids. In high school, a kid was bragging that he got in his third fender bender in his old car, 3 years old, that his parents gave him but he hated. So his parents were buying him an entirely new, current year car to incentivize him to drive better. "Hey, son, you wrecked your new car? Well, fine. We're getting a new one, hoping you'll drive better. Genius." I went to school with a kid who totaled his Escalade, and someone's private land, by off-riding in it. So it was replaced with an Audi, so they couldn't do it again. My mom's friend used to buy new clothes each season and throw out the old ones. She had to be taught by her husband to save them for the next year. My cousin's wife grew up in Ohio, middle class at best, but when he got a high-paying job, she immediately started custom ordering their daughter's clothes, with everything having her name stitched on it, and throwing away my mom's gifts. I worked with this kid who was a good kid but completely disconnected from financial reality for most people. He just moved out west from another state and was trying to get on like a normal adult. He went to buy a new car and was shocked that they couldn't just bill his dad for it since they didn't know him. He ordered a bottle of wine at a restaurant, and the sommelier said, "Certainly, sir." Then the sommelier whispered, "Just for your knowledge, sir, the bottle is $700. He looked straight at him and asked, "Is that a lot?" The sommelier honestly didn't know how to answer. Good kid, and he got a lot better, but he just didn't know. Once, he casually told his mom he needed some help with bills, and she deposited $20,000 into his account. My friend's parents had a dilemma because they both bought each other a new Mercedes for Valentine's Day. This is actually cute. Yeah, I was just thinking that this is simultaneously super wholesome and extremely privileged. A guy looked at my $2,000 beater car in college and commented that it must have been really cheap and guessed $15,000. Here's a doozy for you. My roommate's girlfriend went to a different college than us. She was visiting for the weekend, constantly saying things like, "Oh, she would never be a KD at my school," and just generally putting down anything she saw. Walking through the parking lot to the bars, she looked at a beat-up car, which happened to be my girlfriend's, and says, "If my parents gave me that car to go to college, I'd throw the keys in a river." She didn't have a car. When my roommate said, "At least they have a car," she flipped out on him. I worked at Starbucks, and we hired a new guy who I was training. At one point, I had to show him how to clean the restrooms. I grab the bleach and hand him a pair of gloves, and he looks at me in disgust and says, "We don't have a maid to clean the bathrooms?" He quit the next day, lol. When I was in boarding school, one of my co-boarders handed me some mail saying, "Do you notice anything special about this envelope?" When I checked it out, I realized his face was on the stamp. He was royalty. This sounds like it's out of Coming to America. And when I say he has his own money, I mean he has his own money. Slaps bill down with a picture of Eddie Murphy's face on it. I went to a destination wedding in Mexico resort. Rich kids rented a golf cart, tore through the streets, and flipped the cart, injuring people and causing a huge commotion and traffic jam. A Mexican lady comes out and begins to scold them for their behavior. "You wouldn't act this way at home." The rich kid responds, "I promise you, we do." It was the earnestness of his reply that got me. He really believed he was placating her with that response. There's gotta be a German word for something being funny because the other party is aloof to their own behavior. My brother works at a rehab center for the kids of wealthy parents. He's always got stories, but the one that sticks with me the most was a kid who was in trouble with the law and doing rehab before his court appearances. You know, to look like a better person and hopefully the judge would go easier on him. He was mopey one day and my brother asks him what's wrong. The kid starts talking about how tough the whole experience has been for him, how it's been so hard on his family that his parents had to sell his house to pay for his rehab. My brother felt sympathetic and says, "Damn, that sucks that your parents had to sell their house over this." To which the kid corrected him, "No, they kept their house. They had to sell mine." Well, this is a less version of a spoiled kid if the parents actually punished the kid. I knew a girl whose allowance was $90 a day. She got into trouble, so they cut it to $90 a week. How old was she? Assuming this was high school, how did she manage to spend $30K a year? She was a teenager. She lived in Manhattan, so that explains a bit. One girl from my high school got breast implants for her 18th birthday. Her mom joined her as a mother-daughter bonding activity, followed by the daughter getting a brand new $90,000 Mercedes as a high school graduation gift. I think I saw that movie. And then the daughter's boyfriend comes over, right? I saw this one too. The daughter isn't home, but the mom says he can wait there for her. I work for a dentist, and her son is a spoiled brat. He was at the office one day because she had to bring him to an appointment later that day. He got bored and went out wandering around in some of the local shops. He came back a little while later and without any preamble walked up to her and said, "Give me $80. She asked him what it was for and he just repeated himself and she gave it to him. So the kid is 19 years old. He was 17 at the time of this incident. The father is in the picture, but my boss, the dentist, is the main breadwinner and disciplinarian of the family. The husband is more like another child and just works here and there and lives off her money. She tries to act tough and instill certain morals and values in her kids, but then turns around and caves to all of their demands. For example, her twin daughters are going to university next year, and instead of staying in a dorm, they demanded a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment. They refused to share a bedroom or even a bathroom. At first, she told them absolutely not, but they whined and complained, and she caved. This will be a 2-bed, 2-bath apartment in Toronto, by the way, where rent prices are through the roof. My boss is very much about appearances, and from a young age, got her kids accustomed to a privileged lifestyle. She created monsters. This is pretty tame, but it's what I got. I used to work as an after-school babysitter for a loaded doctor couple with 2 kids. My job was mainly to pick up the younger kid from school and hang out till his parents got home. He was a good kid, but coddled and immature. He was in 5th or 6th grade at this point. Oftentimes, he would not be at his classroom when I came to get him. And the school campus was huge. Different buildings, courtyards, playgrounds, the works. If he wasn't in his classroom, I had to comb the whole campus, and he was rarely in the same place twice. He had a cell phone, but usually ignored its existence, except for playing games on it in the car. The school was in the city, and I had to park on the street. A couple of times, I wound up with parking tickets because, despite having stuffed the parking meter with enough quarters to presumably result in ample time, the search for my charge would take much longer than anticipated. After a point, I mentioned this to him, calmly asking that he respect my time and stay in a set location so that I don't end up with a $25 ticket again. He looked at me with a good-natured shrug and said, "Well, that's not much. You can afford that. Sonny, your parents paid me $140 a week and I was in college. I know you live in a $1.4 million house and your dad buys you an expensive new toy every Sunday, but with the money they're forking over for your education, someone ought to have taught you the value of a dollar by now." But honestly, he was a nice kid. They moved away and I hope he's doing well. This kid back in high school was whining. I mean, literally whimpering, that he had to wait for something like 6 weeks for his custom-built BMW to come over from Germany. If that was me, I'd be surprised it only took 6 weeks to custom-build a car and ship it from another country. I don't really know anything about cars, that just seems like a short time period to custom-build and ship such a large item. I've waited longer than that for 99p things on eBay.